Hello, and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining me tonight is Temima Shames, founder and CEO of Next Step Talent. Temima is known as a rising executive and entrepreneur with a core focus of innovating around artists, creators, and influencers through content and brand partnerships. Her creation, Next Step Talent, is a full service management company that specializes in long term career growth and capitalizing on organic relationships with the talent they work with. Originally rooted in the music business, their clients span those in comedy, acting, modeling, and dance, with an average social following of 10 million across platforms. So, without further ado, Temima, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat today. It's an honor to be able to speak on your podcast. We're doing good. We're here in New York for Fashion Week, so we're very excited to, be here and keep on rolling.
Tamima is always on the go, it seems. You're just in Hawaii, now you're in New York. You were also just in LA.
Yeah, this year has been a lot of traveling, but what I find, I actually find I'm most creative when I travel. So I feel like
Mhm.
it's super awesome. I get to see different people, meet new people, and get different perspectives, which helps me to advance.
All right. Well, are you ready to get started with question one?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, normally we focus this question on your 25-year-old self, but being the rising executive that you aren't quite there yet. So, we're going to shift it. So, imagine for a second you're sitting down with your younger self. What one piece of advice would you give her on a personal note? And what one piece of advice would you give her from a business perspective?
Ooh, okay. I think on a business note, I'll start with that. I would just tell myself that I kind of did this when I was younger, but I didn't realize how much it impacted is like every single person around you, including in your high school, your elementary school, all the way through your life is so important to really be nice to everybody and be kind because you never know where somebody's going to end up or how you guys are going to cross paths in the future. And your little fight on that given day in high school is really not going to matter. So it's important to make sure that you're leaving off on a kind note with anybody that you meet. I find it super funny because I recently have gotten back in touch with people from high school who I never really even talked to then. I mean, there was no bad blood. We just weren't really friends. And now they're working and I see them at Fashion Week or I see them here and there. And we're able to provide value, and it's actually important because we have that close like hometown connection, which feels a lot different, even though in high school maybe we were in different friend groups or it felt like different like social statuses, which really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. On a personal note, I would say really not getting too caught up in every little moment. It's so easy to react out of emotion when things happen. But when you look back, a lot of those moments that you reacted, whether angrily, sad, whatever it might be, don't necessarily matter. So, something that I would tell my younger self is to give 30 minutes after anything happens to really process that information before reacting. Even if it's a text message, a phone call you're on, like it is totally okay to say, hey, I would love to process this. I want to make sure that I respond properly. Sometimes you obviously need to respond quicker than that, but it's important to just allow yourself that time if you can.
All great advice. So I'm curious to know what was the driving force before you started Next Step Talent? I mean, you're so young and you did it so early on.
Yeah, so there's a few things. Being that I grew up in a household where I needed to financially support myself from a really young age, I've been working my whole life. I started when I was 10 years old and I worked at every single place in my hometown that you could probably imagine, like a smoothie place and a shoe store and like clothing store and just anything that you could think of. And it gave me a lot of skills to be able to work with people and understand psychology. And I think one thing about being an entrepreneur is the importance of understanding psychology because when you can understand how people react to a situation and how that actually reflects more on what they're going through in their own life, it allows you to create better ideas that they're going to be able to, how do I put this? Like, they're going to be able to digest.
Hmm.
And so essentially what happened was, is I worked always entrepreneurial, always coming up with these crazy ideas. I think one point I wanted to be a marine doctor, like a marine vet. One point I was like, no, I'm gonna go to school for acting. But I had a manager for acting in high school, and so that was kind of my second intro to the industry. My dad's a touring Israeli musician, so I grew up in the studio, but not really around pop culture, more so like Israeli music. And then decided to go to school for music business, graduated, was interning at all these different record labels and management companies. And when I was at Atlantic Records, I feel like something that a lot of people don't realize is that you don't need to know what you want. When I was at Atlantic Records interning, I was like, I want to be a CEO of a record label. That was my goal. And not even a year later, I started my own company that's in management. So things can change so rapidly as long as you go with the doors that open. That's what's most important. So what ended up happening was I was working at Visionary Records doing influencer marketing when COVID was happening. And I was learning so much about the TikTok space. I hadn't really known much about it, but I was digging in, learning every day, and I started to get close with some of the influencers. And so I started to manage some of them, and I loved it. And it took off, and then I was able to backdoor into music and music management. I managed a few people in music in college and always loved that. But as we all know, music management takes a long time, and I needed to
Yes.
pay my rent just like anybody else. So I chose to kind of build up the influencer side first to where I would have a footing for a company that I could then, you know, have the freedom to do the music management side and put in the effort toward it. And so that's kind of how it all happened. It really happened by going through whatever door was open, even if I didn't know really how to do it. When I started influencer management, I had no idea what I was doing. And all my clients know that because I was open about it. And I think that's the biggest thing is like being upfront of like, hey, I might not know what I'm doing, but I will meet the people and I will do what I need to do, the research and the learning to get you to where you want to be. And because at the end of the day, nobody knows what they're doing. Like
So
realistically,
true.
things are changing so fast. Like everybody, whether you've been in the industry for 30 years, you don't know the new things and I don't know the old things, you know?
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, which we've touched on before in this podcast, is that of course you need talent and you need the education, but if you have the hustle and you have the drive, more than likely you're going to be successful.
A
So,
hundred percent.
question two, here we go. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and you and I both know that that is no different in the music industry. Sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes they can be good. What's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
There's a bunch. I think, I mean, I don't know if this is a secret or more a different perspective, but one thing that I like to share to the music industry and to all the artists is that influencers are storytellers. Because right now we are seeing so many people. You have the artists being like, the labels want them to be influencers. They don't want to be quote unquote influencers. But the reality of the situation is you are. All the artists are influencers because you're all that means is you're having an impact on the people that you're reaching. And influencers themselves, and I'm speaking generally, this doesn't mean every single one, but they're storytellers. They wake up every day and they plan out a script of a story of how they're going to get a point of view across. Whether that's a makeup person, whether that's a dancer, whether whatever it is, they're telling a story of whatever they're putting out there. And you are the same. And so it's important to just understand as an artist instead of being like, I don't want to be an influencer and kind of shut down, is like, how can you tell that story for your own story? Because you can do it just as well as anybody else can without getting put into a box.
Mhm.
Um, and the other secret I would give would be probably like utilizing all platforms and reposting your content to all of them. Because so many people get so overwhelmed by, we need a, how are we supposed to do 7 platforms? Well, a lot of times what we do is we understand the algorithm of short form versus long form. And music artists have both of that, right? Your music videos are your long form, your lyric videos are your long form, and your short form are the day to day things. Um, so, how can you combine promotional music with your day to day? Because fans want to get to know you. So, you doing a vlog style, however you want to go about that, that is what's going to connect to the fans more. And always remembering your brand, like who are you trying to target and what are they going to look at your holistic picture as? I feel like a lot of artists sometimes struggle with their branding because what they want to portray themselves as is not what they actually like viewing. So like
Mhm.
thinking from an outside perspective of like, if I walked up to a random person on the side of the road and they were like, and I asked them, do you know blah, blah, blah? Would they actually be able to know what that person is, what they stand for, and what they want to be?
Right. So have you found it difficult going from working with artists directly to influencers in different spaces?
Um, it's difficult from times, but I actually find the understanding of all the areas of the industry help because sometimes I'll have my influencers call up one of my artists and explain it to them from a different perspective, or my actor call up my influencer, or my athlete call up whoever, because each person has a different perspective on the industry. But at the end of the day, everyone has the same goal. They want to influence others and they want to put their message and their story out there, whatever that story is.
Hmm. Very, very well said. Well, we are at the final question. So here we go. Throughout your career, I can only imagine you've been asked plenty of questions so far, whether it was through the media, the conference, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, I'll bet there was one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question and what would be your answer?
Hmm.
It's a tough one.
It's really hard. That I've never been asked. I mean, maybe I have been asked this, but I think that a lot of people, um, just the schedule that one goes through, or like maybe some fears as an entrepreneur. I feel like people often touch on like the successes. And what makes being an entrepreneur so unreachable to most people is that they don't know where to start. And I do speak on this a lot, so I wouldn't say it's completely unanswered, but I haven't really done, it's not really on a podcast or anything specifically, but um is how do you go about starting a business? And I think what are some of those fears associated with it? And that's more so, I'm talking about not fears when I started. I'm talking about fears on a given day. Because often people are like, you're so lucky, you travel so much, you have so much stability. And as an entrepreneur,
You're
you
like,
actually have,
no.
yeah, you actually have like no stability. But what's awesome is you have to, look at it as like each day I tackle each problem as it happens. Um, but I think my answer to the question all the time is, um, you're never gonna have that right moment, and you're never gonna know the information. I hear this day in, day out. People are like, I need to learn more before I could start my business. Now, what does that even mean? I don't know, because you're going to learn throughout your life no matter what you're doing. So you're never going to have this one day where you wake up and you're like, I've learned enough. I could start my business. That is not, it's always going to give you that bubbly feeling in your stomach. You're always going to get scared. And that fear doesn't go away. There's no level, there's no like, today I hit success. That's not
Mhm.
how the world works. So in order to do that, I think I always tell people, you need to define success for you, and that shouldn't be a number. Because if it's a number, when you hit it, you're going to need to like set another number. But what's success, that feeling like helping people, or what is that thing for you that's going to drive you? and then making sure that that doesn't have a cap. Because when you give yourself that cap, you don't have something after. And you see a lot of successful people say, "Oh, I'm unhappy," and it's because they gave themselves a, if I get here, if I become a CEO, I'm successful. So then now what? You know?
Mhm. I think it's also surrounding yourself with the right team. So how did you go about
For
getting
sure.
your team put together?
My team, like the team of people that work for me, or just the team. So I think there's two sides to a team. Number one, I have some really great mentors. I'll just shout him out because he's the kindest human I've ever met. Noah Rakowski has been a really insane mentor to me. He totally doesn't have to, but he helps me day in, day out if I call him and I'm just like, hey, I need advice. He'll pick up the phone no matter what. And give me advice, even if it's a stupid question. And building my team took a while. That's another thing like people don't necessarily talk about is it took me probably until now to have a team where I feel confident that I could travel and things are getting done. And even then, sometimes, I need to provide more leadership and I need to look internally and see like how can I improve myself. But I went to people who I started with people who I trusted. I started with a lot of interns that I ended up hiring. Then I went to, I get a vibe of people. I think for me, it's the people that I can relate to and the people who understand my vision are the people who end up sticking around. When I rush into hiring someone because I'm overwhelmed or need to hire, that's when it doesn't work out. But that's also something a lot of business owners look at the other people and they're like, they weren't good for me. When a lot of times it's actually just, I wasn't ready to train someone or I wasn't ready to pick the right person. And so I rushed into it. And I think that
Mhm.
that's something that is so important to me to always look internally and say, okay, what could I have done differently? Or what did I do? Because yes, there are certain people that aren't good for a role, but that doesn't mean that that person is like bad. It could also mean that I just wasn't ready to prepare them for what they need to be doing.
Right. Well, Temima, it has been so great having you on tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Can't wait to see what the future holds for you.
Thank you. You too. And to everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Stay tuned for next week's episode of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. See you next time.